They're camped out on the beach. They have their fortifications. They're ready for the fleet of ships to come in. And over the horizon, they just see a fleet of hot air balloons.
Suspended from them, the ships.
Stardust style. Hey YouTube, welcome back to our channel. My name is Elena.
And I'm Bjorn.
And this is Vikings React, where we take a look at some of your favorite Viking shows and discuss their historical accuracies.
So we are finally wrapping up Viking Season 6. We're at the season finale. Really excited to get into it. Can't wait. This whole thing's been building up for it. As much as I've said about the show, I'm still excited about it to see what happens. And yeah, there's not much else to say.
It's going to be great.
On that note.
You're not inside. You know.
He's so much smaller than him.
Queen
He is.
So cute.
I have been persuaded that we are in imminent danger of an attack by the Russ, whoever or whatever they are.
Bruce.
You have no idea what you are now facing. What we are now facing. Which is the twilight of the gods. The end of everything. I have to assume that the Rus will attack from the sea. And if we...
It's not Russ, it's Roos. Harold said it wrong, Bjorn said it right. Go on.
It's sometimes hard for us to know exactly how the Vikings viewed the world, and the closest that we come to it is the retelling of the stories in the mythology. It's just in terms of their mindset and what they believed and sort of who they worshipped and everything like that. We can't say how they worshipped the gods. But one of the big things in the mythology of the Norse was Ragnarok. And that was the twilight of the gods, right? Sort of the end of the cycle. But also of note, because of that, we know that the Norse saw the world as cyclical instead of just, this is the end of everything. So for them to say, this is the twilight of the gods, this is the end of everything, doesn't make a ton of sense.
Yeah,
they didn't see it like that. They didn't have that mindset. It wasn't like 2012, everything's gonna die.
Mayan calendar. Yeah. Yeah, that's very fair. Yeah, so a lot of the times people will easily equate it to like the end of times or like Revelations. Like they'll basically akin it to like the Viking version of the end of the world. And that's not necessarily the case. Like I can see it because it's like the death of a lot of the gods, it's like the world's end and stuff like that. But because they did believe and have this mindset of a cyclical way of life and of like life was a constant circle, there was rebirth in death. It was just part of a segment that, much like the spring comes after winter. The world dies, it is reborn again. You see it every year, you see it every day with the sun setting and then rising again.
And they celebrated that as well.
Absolutely, and they celebrated it. And so it's a little bit misguided for them to akin Ragnarok as the end of times, basically, because of that. That's a good point. There's even a kind of meta thought that Ragnarok is going to happen, is happening, and has happened all simultaneously in like the same sphere of existence.
Time is relative.
Exactly, though. Exactly. And it's like because we know all these things are going to pass, but how do we know that they're going to happen if we already know what happens? So that's a whole other discussion about philosophy and how the Vikings viewed things on an esoteric nature. And also on a metaphysical nature and things like that, which we just don't know because the only way to know that is to ask a Viking, and you can't do that.
Exactly. We can infer what their mindset was.
Yeah, we can infer and we can interpret as much as we can, but again, it's all speculation. But from what we do understand about how they viewed other things in relation to their life, then they wouldn't necessarily have that same kind of very standardized, this is the beginning, this is the end, Ragnarok is the end, everything dies.
And also, I don't know if people from Norway would look at Slavs and go, this is the end of everything, the armies are coming.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, they were an indigenous people in the eastern continents and stuff like that, and what did the Vikings do when they first met them? The reason they're called Slavs is because it comes from the word slave.
Yeah.
A lot of modern Slavs actually prefer to be called Slavonic rather than Slavic. But yeah, the reason they were referred to, they were called Slavs is because They were just referred to as what they were, which is people who were taken and made thralls, basically. Knowing that, I feel like if any Viking like knew what was going on and stuff, they'd see an incoming army of Slavs and just be like, "Oh, what do the peasants want?" No, and I mean like this is all like just jesting and joking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean there's no reason to think that they'd see some kind of like larger army and suddenly fear that they were all going to be destroyed. Like it wasn't like a plague of locusts coming to like devour the land, or it wasn't like a massive tidal wave tsunami coming to like destroy and break up the earth. It wasn't a Mongolian horde.
I'll just summon on his vassal kings and warriors to come to our aid.
Do you think they will come? The other kings?
I don't.
You don't have to do this. You're going to have a baby.
I'm going to have a Norwegian baby, not a Russ baby. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
So you're saying your archers aren't enough? You're an Ironside.
Like it would still be Norway. It'd be under new leadership. Yeah, so like maybe this is actually an interesting point to make. So like in the Viking Age, or at least to the Vikings, to Scandinavians and things like that, at the time, it didn't necessarily matter where you were from. It mattered who you were pledged to. So like you could be a Swede in Sweden, pledged to a Swedish king or a Swedish jarl. You'd be Swedish. You could be a Spaniard traveling, a merchant who decides to spend time in Denmark and becomes good friends and a vassal of the king there, and he could swear an allegiance to the Danish king as like a personal thing and give his life to that king. He would then be considered Danish, since that's who he's sworn to, even though he might have been born outside of that land, outside in Spain.
They didn't really see origin or race, really. It just depended on who you served at the time.
Exactly. Like, you could be from a certain area, and that would certainly be something, demonstrative for yourself. And that could be a staple of, like, oh, yeah, no, you're from Saxony, you're from England, you're from Spain, you're from Brazil, or it doesn't matter. But if you were sworn to a person, if you were sworn to a certain king and pledged your allegiance that way and then served with them, then you were their man. You were Danish, you were Swedish, you were Norwegian, you were whatever, based on who you were pledged to.
Right.
Yeah. And that's because they didn't really have that, like, overarching national identity until later on, until much later on.
Well, it is difficult to grasp because with the more modern history that we do have, race is, the king. It's especially with, American history and slavery and everything like that, race
To say the least.
mattered. It still matters. But back in the Viking Age, they didn't really see that. You could come as a slave from anywhere, really, to a Scandinavian country, serve your master well for 10 years, be released with your master's blessing.
You become a free man.
Yeah, become a free man, and, people would see you as just a person of that country.
Yeah,
It doesn't
free man.
matter your skin color or where you come from.
Yeah, exactly. There wasn't that kind of sense of it. Now, like, they would certainly remark on it because it might have been unusual to them if somebody was a different skin tone or from a certain region or spoke with a funny accent or a funny language. But they didn't have that, like, this modern notion of, like, race and ethnicity and things like that. Yeah, so interesting point, all well and done. So with that in mind, actually, this could be an interesting point where she doesn't want the child, she doesn't want the country to fall and become an extension of Rus territory. She doesn't want it to be born into a Rus country.
That's actually that's a really good point. So that's a really good catch and makes absolute sense.
Yeah, so that's huge.
That was good.
Yeah.
That was really good on them.
Made us think. I like that. Yeah. Like, what? Oh, right.
I think that's actually like the best of them all is when you have to think about it for a second. You're just like, that makes complete sense.
Yeah, right. Man, what a roller coaster of emotion this has been so far already. Wow, can't wait to see the rest of the episode.
Don't you understand that they're going to attack in overwhelming numbers?
Yeah. If you have a better plan. I didn't think so.
do you want to say to me?
I'm going to say to you what you already know. You're in love with Björn? Maybe. But I recognize something in you. If you want, and if you're truly ambitious, I will make you queen of all Norway.
We have just met, and already you want me to betray my husband.
The best fruit is always forbidden. I'm only asking you to think about my suggestion.
When did he get so creepy?
Right?
I don't remember him being this creepy in the earlier seasons.
I remember him being like very psychopathic Viking style.
Yeah.
You know, like singing as he
but not,
murdered
like,
innocent
creepy.
people. Yeah, but not like.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's creepy too.
Yeah, just in a different level. That was like homicidal creepy. This is like rapey creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's weird.
Women in the Viking Age did have a lot of free will in terms of who they married. So that's something to keep in mind here. She's exercising her right to marry who she chooses.
Yeah, and this would be a big taboo. Even though he's king and stuff like that, it'd be
that's still
real strange in the
making
Viking Age for him
sense.
to be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
I know it is what you wanted, so I am sorry too. But it is the judgment of the gods. Perhaps I am not meant to have a child with you.
Don't say that. We will have children.
They do look like brothers.
Yeah, they do.
It's
It's good casting.
Yeah.
Farðu og vel, minn kæri sonur. Aldrei hefði ég kost á að kenna þig. Að sjá þig stíga fyrsta skref. En ég býð þér litla stund. Svo þú sért ekki einsama.
I do like the fact that they're using that, just like in important moments like this, to either showcase that they're speaking a different language or, you know, in a very heartfelt moment like this, essentially, just to kind of ground it in reality.
Yeah, I do like that effect as well. It has like a really big kind of like feel and like sentiment when they end up using it.
They use it well.
Yeah.
If Björn finds out.
He won't find out. You won't tell him. It will be our secret. And if the rules attack, then either Björn or I, or probably both of us, will die.
But the gods having so.
I'm tired of waiting for the gods. They never listen. I want you now.
Ah, there was also female warriors.
They also have galleys. I'm sorry, but you cannot just allow some dweeby little runt to like lip sing Einar Selvik. He should have been like in that wall doing it himself. Like
They should have brought Einar back, and he's made
2 appearances.
yeah, he's made appearances before to sing the songs that he's written.
The first time was awesome.
Yeah,
I want to watch that scene again.
that scene was amazing.
So cool.
Yeah.
That was so cool. But that was Einar Selvik. I will never not be able to tell who that voice that is.
Yep.
My boy. It's my dude right there.
It wasn't even a cover. That was just him.
Vikings didn't have, or the Slavs, I should say. The Rus Vikings didn't have galleys. So the galley is like that is a style of ship, much more typical in like a later period, but generally it follows that kind of like same design as you saw there with like kind of the flat, like the curved bottom, and like kind of comes to the point with the flat back, and then it also like the main feature is that it has like the levels, so it has like the deck and the upper deck. I don't know the terms and stuff. I've heard that was actually designed to combat the Vikings, because Viking ships, as we all know, are just like the one kind of segment there. So it was designed in a way to let people who were facing off of them in like sea battles be able to get higher ground and like shoot down or like see down onto the Viking decks,
Right.
And not kind of just be like, you know, man to man with it. They give them a higher platform to maneuver and manipulate the warfare. I've heard that. I don't know how true it is.
I also have heard the same thing in regards to that's what the English did.
Exactly, yeah.
With
So
their ships.
Yeah, so like the English and like the Franks. But it wouldn't be the same case with the Rus. I mean, because first off, the Rus are landlocked. They certainly, you know, can navigate, you know, large bodies of water like the Black and Caspian Sea, and all the rivers and things like that. But it would have been the same longship design. Again, they're like landlocked.
Unless they borrowed them from somebody. Just like get a whole fleet of ships from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I feel like this is getting Game of Thrones kind of like, wait, how did they get here all of a sudden? So, I don't know.
I mean, I've been feeling that for the last like 3 episodes. So
Yeah.
this isn't anything new.
But yeah, galleys, no, thank you. And I might be totally wrong with like the type of ship, but I just mean like that general style with like the upper platforms and things. So I just want to give myself a little discredit there.
Is where we will attack. Here is the mouth of the river leading into Arrow's capital. No doubt, Bjorn will block it, as well as planning other surprises.
The famous Bjorn Ironside.
That is a very detailed map there.
It is certain he'll be there.
We will bring these smaller barges with us. Transfer our warriors into them and simply... storm the beach.
So
horses?
now it's Normandy. This is D-Day, what he's planning right now. This is the U.S. invasion of Normandy on the German Western Front.
You cannot speak for the gods. Only for yourself.
If you say so, Bjorn. After all, you're my elder brother, you know better.
I know better than to attack my own people with a Christian army. If you really believe that our father's legacies to defeat our gods, and you are all my father. And I'll prove it.
What
was that?
That's scaling a wall, buddy. Oh, wow. Okay. Sure. Get your shield, man. This is literally D-Day. I can't get over it. But are they insinuating that Bjorn and Harold are the Nazis?
So, first of all, did you catch what kind of longbows they were using?
Was it a recurve bow?
I think so, yeah.
So there's a few different types of bows, obviously. The Vikings used longbows, which were long bows. They were long. And that was kind of seen prevalently across Europe during the time period, during the Dark Age. You start to see like laminated composite recurve bows, things like that, more in the east and other areas. So there are like recurve bows, which have kind of that like bowed, like that shape to them a little bit. And that's basically to create more tension and more power to the draw, because it's naturally the limbs are pulling themselves forward. When you set the string, it already is kind of pulling back that tension a lot more than with just a standard longbow. So it's able to fire a little bit more like quicker and a little bit more force behind it. Typically, and then you also see like composite bows are actually made out of multiple materials, like laminated and glued together, and that comes more from like an Eastern influence. Like you see that in like Mongolia and Asia and China, as well as with Magyars, I believe, as well. Like the Magyars in the East kind of had these recurve bows and composite bows and things of the nature, and that would be actually like multiple layers of like wood and horn, essentially that are stacked and glued together, basically, and that gives it more strength and like a bunch of other kind of additions to it. It might make more sense to give those bows to the Rus on the opposite side, just with the relation to that being a little bit more of something that was found in Eastern territories, like with the Magyars. But for the Norwegians to use like composite bows or recurve bows that you're pretty much seeing across the board here, not so much of a thing.
Yeah.
What makes less sense to me is that I hardly ever saw a spear. This is definitely a moment where you'd want spears, and also would show why they're prevalent.
Yeah.
In combat.
Actually.
To speak a little bit about like Viking combat and tactics, they typically would avoid large pitched battles like this if they could. I think what would make way more sense is if the Rus sailed somewhere else and disembarked their men like a mile up the coastline,
Like
and then just
like
marched
past
in
that cove that
and then like marched in behind them and like met them on the front there. That would have been a better tactic.
Right.
Like all of this would be out the window. Like what they should have done is sail somewhere else and then just march on the capital, wherever that is. Not this D-Day landing situation. And you see that with the Vikings. You know, they raid up and down coastlines and stuff. But like even when they were attacking Paris, they'd sail in through the river and they'd disembark and, you know, raid and attack, and then they'd get back in their ships and sail further down the coastline and then disembark and do other things. But they didn't sail into Paris and launch an attack from the river at Paris.
Right.
You know, they thought about it. They created strongholds that they could retreat to if need be, and they went about it tactically. This is just for show.
See, those shields suck. One way to do it. While rock climbing is great,
We hear that like there's some accounts of them using Dane axes to climb the walls of fortifications and forts and stuff.
yeah, they didn't specifically create ice picks just to go rock climbing with all of those ropes and everything.
Yeah, no. Nothing historically speaking. Like, the only thing that comes to mind is, like, Njaal's saga when the dude tries to climb his house to, like, save his home and he gets stabbed with a spear. Like, that's the only thing that comes to mind. But in terms of, like, rock climbing up the sheer mountain face, probably not. You know what? Missed opportunity. Hot air balloon.
They could have had a fleet of hot air balloons going over that mountain.
No, I'm glad they didn't. I much prefer this. I way prefer this method. So you know what? I'm not gonna fight it anymore. I'm gonna embrace this. Yeah, good, solid choice, everybody. Good tactic. Climb the sheer wall with some Viking ice picks.
I can see it now. They're camped out on the beach. They have their fortifications. They're ready for the fleet of ships to come in. And over the horizon, they just see a fleet of hot air balloons.
Suspended from them, the ships.
Stardust style.
Yeah, right. We'll file that under missed opportunities.
There you go.
Why wouldn't you set it on fire first? In passing, I saw a helmet that was like a big metal helmet, but it basically looked like a wide-brimmed hat. It had like a dome and then like a big thing.
Saw that.
That's a historical helmet, but from like the 15th century, like from a much later period, like 14th, 16th. So I'm just gonna say 15th. Doesn't matter. So again, historical armor, not from that time period. A cool point for this, actually, the main reason I stopped this was because this tactic is a little bit reminiscent of a much earlier period, for when the Gauls were actually going to war against the Romans in mainland Europe in, BC, whatever year. So it's mentioned in like the Chronicles of the Gallic Wars. That's like written and recorded by the Roman Caesar and Roman legions and army at the time. But there's a specific battle where the Romans were in the Teutoburg Forest, and what happened was they were ambushed on this narrow straight passage through the forest, where the forest kind of naturally slopes up high and everything. The Gauls had actually built these like earthen temporary walls on either side so they could attack from cover, and they actually had these massive balls of like tar and pitch and all kinds of stuff, and they set them on fire and rolled them down the hills, smashing into the flanks of the legionaries, and absolutely like decimated them, basically breaking morale, breaking formation, just not giving them an inch. But this is what it kind of reminds me of, just like an interpretation on that. I don't know why they wouldn't set it on fire before rolling it down. It kind of seems pointless to just be like a thing that's on fire.
Maybe it's just to prevent their own ranks from catching fire.
Rule 1 of warfare, safety first. Yeah,
yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Sure.
Oh, it's a two-handed axe.
Finally. Yeah, I can.
For God's sake. I will defeat you.
You are wrong. The gods abandoned you a long time ago, my brother.
Looks just a head that was on fire?
Yep.
Okay. Just making sure.
That's what they're gonna leave it off on?
That was brutal. That was beautiful, though.
That's what they're gonna leave it off on?
That was beautiful. You know the song that was playing?
Yeah.
It's from Skál. It's Ragnar Saga. It's his death lament. From Ragnar Saga. So it's like the whole thing of like, you know, that whole poem that he recites at the end.
Yeah.
It's that set to music. So it's fitting for Ragnar's son. I feel like the battle was kind of rushed. Like I really liked how they did it.
Of course, it was rushed. They left it until like the end of the last episode.
Yeah, they spent the first 20 minutes building up to it, and then they kind of did it. I really liked how it was done, like as like cinematography wise, cinematically is the word I was looking for.
Well, cinematically, they know what they're doing. Like, there's no question.
Yeah, never
about
been a
it.
question about that.
Yeah.
But I do feel like it was very anticlimactic for like how important it was supposed to be.
And maybe that's the way that they intended it, but it feels like there's no closure. It's just like it's in a very abrupt end, and maybe that's the way that they meant for it to feel.
Yeah.
But it definitely leaves something wanting. I do like the cuts that they did to him and Ivar on the beach.
Yeah.
Just talking to each other, because it really felt like at the core of everything, and at the core of every war, there is the battle between basically like 2 or 3 people, and everyone else is just fighting that same battle.
Yeah.
So those cuts to them talking it out, and, you know, saying that the other was going to die, or, you know, Ivar saying that the gods had abandoned Bjorn and all of that, like, that was actually pretty cool to see, because at the core of the battle, it was their war.
Yeah, and it was like that conversation that never happened, you know. I would agree with you on that one as well a lot. I thought it was really great to kind of see the dichotomy between their two standpoints. You know, kind of that showcase of like what each believed and what they were kind of fighting for a little bit. It seemed, I really liked how they kind of showed that like Bjorn had like a little bit more to like prove, and like was very like rigid in his way, but kind of knew, like it seemed that he was very like adamant and very forceful because he knew he was wrong in a sense, which is why like on the opposite side, Ivar being very like calm and patient, almost like mournful of it. Like he knows, but he's not really like happy about it. Just being like, no, you're not gonna win.
Yeah, like he's figured it out, and he kind of wishes that Bjorn also saw his viewpoint as well, but he doesn't, so he knows he's going to lose.
Yeah, but Bjorn being kind of like, and I feel like he's kind of always maintained that as well, that kind of like attitude of like going up against whatever odd, he's gonna just hold on and be like, no, this is it, and like fight for it. And even if he gets screwed over, he still like kind of comes through with that like that strong kind of force of will, which is really nice. So even still up to the end, and like you kind of saw that like he might have known that Ivar was right in that conversation, but he kind of just refused to acknowledge it regardless, and it didn't really matter in the long run. It's not going to change his fate.
It was a good episode.
It was a good episode.
That was a really good episode. I'm really sad. Bjorn was the last remaining character that, you know, I've spoken about like the original characters being very like steadfast in their Viking beliefs. As far as the writing is concerned, and he was basically the last of them.
Yeah.
I feel
It's that
like
final bastion of like good writing. Very similar caliber with two very different styles. You know, like Lagerther's funeral was awesome because of like the history and the thought that kind of went into it, like the research, the extreme lengths that they went to perform her burial, and the rituals and the ceremony that went into it, and that like as a historical point was awesome to see. Even with the interpretation that they took, it was really beautifully done.
it was beautiful.
This wasn't necessarily like historically to the same scale, but it definitely did the same amount of justice, I feel like, just
for
with
sure.
the prep and everything like that. So I'd still say this is a pretty powerful episode.
Absolutely.
Despite that, even if it was lacking a little bit here and there with like the actual like historical accounts and things, I feel like that's a little bit more beside the point for what they were trying to do, and especially with what they were trying to accomplish too, because they didn't really have anything historical to base this on. So they had more leniency, you know, here and there. So it's a little bit hard to say from like a historical interpretation how this kind of pairs up, and I don't think they're comparable really.
It actually is interesting to, you know, think about how this is Vikings, and everyone thinks of Vikings as, you know, these warriors and raiders and sailors and stuff like that, but we really didn't see that much of it in
Yeah,
this
not
season.
nearly as much as you kind of expect from a culture whose pretty much identity revolves, like, in the mainstream media around being aggressive warriors.
Exactly.
Yeah, they were able to develop plenty else going into it.
It was kind of a season where characters were just trying to live lives, and it still turned into a show by the end of it.
If that's not life, I don't know what is. You're just trying to live peaceful. You're just be your common best self, and life you every way you turn. I don't know what else is more accurate than that.
At the same time, we've had hot air balloons and horn helmets, so it's very difficult. You know, it's very, very difficult.
Yep. Yep.
And all manners of little things like costuming and the settings and all of that stuff. You know, we had heart enough on all of that throughout the season.
Yeah.
So just taking everything like that into account, I would give it a 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to factor in the historical importance of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
This is a historical show. It's on the History Channel. It's not just like a dressed up themed romance drama series. If that was the case, they'd all be in Wagner clothing with winged horns and flowy red capes, riding in on flying horses and like chariots and all kinds. Like, it'd basically be Roman Viking age.
Right.
Like, so there's an in between, and the historical value and the historical basis is important. Mm-hmm. It really is. And they know that, and they're able to do it so well when they want to. But for some reason, they just choose not to really capitalize on that. You know, we saw moments where they did it so exceptionally well. Yeah. They really did. Even when they took licensing into their own hands and kind of went off and took their own like creative, artistic like direction with everything, it was still really well done in like a really unique way. And we've seen that throughout the whole series and in the season as well. And so we know we can. And because of that, it frustrates me even more when they don't. You know, because it adds so much to the story, and it would make it such a more impactful show. And I feel like it would provide more to the common viewer, even if, you know, their main interest isn't in Vikings specifically, and they're just watching it as a period drama. That's fine, but you can still do the same thing and hold the same effect. You're not losing anything by being a little bit more historically mindful. Mm-hmm. You're not going to lose any content. You're still going to have the same exact force, the same exact impact to your typical standard kind of mid-range audience, but you're going to capture the minds of the people who actually look at the show integrally like we do, mm-hmm. like I do, like you do, and like so many other people do. And it's going to have so much more to it, and more people will kind of attest and be like, oh, well, you like that. It's so cool in addition because of this stuff that goes into it. I'd say just based on that and like seeing their capabilities and knowing what they can do because they have done it, and kind of the refusal to do, and pretty much everything that we talked about, I'd just give it a 5. You know, like 5, 3 stars out of 5 stars, mm-hmm. kind of thing. You know, like a little bit higher than average, but just right there with everything said and done. Overall,
for the season, I would give my rating as a 6.
Yeah. Overall, I'm gonna stick with a 5. Just like 5 out of 10.
Yeah.
I'd say it's pretty average.
Yeah, and to be fair, like it was way better than I thought it was going to be. Like, there were some pretty good episodes in there that Absolutely. I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and I want to focus on that too, because even mm-hmm. through all of my ranting and raving and stuff, like, it was way better than I expected, and I really did enjoy the season.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a good show. Thank you so much for watching, guys. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you can be notified of our future videos. And we will see you in the next one.
Skál.
And that's a wrap on Vikings, Season 6, Part 1.